Now you don't have to feel guilty. These are the 7 words that take this show from a mostly fun and light-hearted affair to the more tense plotline that makes up the show's final 9 episodes. This last stretch of the show begins with the infamous Christmas arc, best known for a particularly emotional scene, but we have 3 episodes of setup to discuss before we can talk about that. The first thing we need to discuss is Chapter 1, Minori's Guilt. We start the arc with those aforementioned words, now you don't have to feel guilty, before showing us how they have affected Minori. The phrase itself has 2 layers of meaning, the surface level one being that Minori doesn't have to feel bad about liking Ryuji, now that she knows that Taiga is interested in someone else. Taiga and Minori are best friends. Every interaction they have had throughout the show shows camaraderie at the least and an affectionate bond at the most. It makes sense that Minori would want to hide her romantic feelings for Ryuji, given how strongly she believes that Taiga is in love with him. We get hints about this as late as episode 6, as she continues to allude to their romantic potential, even after everyone else has let the rumour go. But now that she has evidence that Taiga loves someone else, now you don't have to feel guilty means that she doesn't have to worry anymore. Problem solved. She can date Ryuji and not have it affect Taiga in the least. Of course, that's if you don't realise the hidden meaning behind Army's words, or rather the context they are conveyed in. That context being sarcasm. Both Army and Minori know that Taiga does have feelings for Ryuji, or at the very least that they are already destined to be together, judging by their current dynamic. Minori knows this, and that is why, despite evidence to the contrary, she still feels a great deal of guilt for thinking about Ryuji in a romantic way. I mentioned back in Ghost Hunter's Getaway that Minori would eventually learn that love is not something you can control or put off. And in this arc, it is her desperate bid to do so that sends her into a downward spiral. As she continues to have feelings for Ryuji against her will, she simultaneously feels guilt over potentially complicating her best friend's happily ever after. This guilt creates a rather obvious fact. Chapter 2, Minori has changed, and so has Ryuji. This constant guilt changes the way that Minori interacts with her friends, particularly Ryuji. They don't spend nearly as much time together, and the time they do have is awkward at best and meltdown-inducing at worst. Even Taiga realizes that something is wrong. All I know is that something's not right between you guys. It kind of feels like you and her have changed. In saying this, Taiga is clearly on the right track to figuring out what is going on between them. Minori has obviously changed recently due to the guilt I discussed earlier, but Ryuji has changed as well. For a little while now, he has been more open and comfortable around Minori, partly due to sheer exposure, but also due to something else. I said all the way back in Admiration and Acceptance that what Ryuji really loves about Minori is her uncompromising confidence and social glow. He likes these things about her because they were aspects that he believed he was lacking. But over the course of the show, Ryuji has made more friends, been seen and accepted by his class as a whole, and has grown more confident as a result. He has successfully broken the cycle that kept him isolated. The more he grows in this respect, the less relevant his reason for liking Minori is. He still likes her, of course, but as this arc continues, we begin to get the picture that his romantic priorities have shifted, almost as if his conscious crush on Minori is being slowly overtaken by a more subconscious desire. Of course, there is one person who has figured all this out and can see the metaphorical storm on the horizon. Chapter 3, Army's Warning. Army is a bit of a wild card at this point in the story. She knows everything the audience does about the romantic pursuit that Taiga and Ryuji are helping each other with, and she can see the disaster that is coming as a result. She likens the dynamic between Ryuji, Minori, and Taiga to that of a father, mother, and child, with Ryuji playing the father, working hard to keep the child, Taiga, safe and happy. The relationship between Ryuji and Taiga can certainly be considered a symbiotic one, not too dissimilar from that of a parent and child. But they aren't. Taiga is not Ryuji's daughter, and treating her as such has created a situation that Ryuji and Taiga have been unaware of, but that Army and Minori seemingly understand. This situation sees both of these characters relying on each other and putting themselves in a prime position to fall in love, which could create issues since part of their dynamic is to romantically match each other with someone else. While Ryuji doesn't understand everything that makes this situation dangerous for the people he cares about, he seemingly doesn't argue with Ami when she tells him that he should know better. Ryuji does understand how he and Taiga's dynamic has complicated things. In this very arc, his classmates are trying to match Taiga with Kitamura, something that he has been trying to do for the entire run of the show. But instead of being happy, or relieved, or grateful to have allies in this journey, he becomes frustrated, but he cannot quite explain why. Of course, Ryuji decides to ignore Ami's warning and the uneasy feeling he has about his and Taiga's dynamic. The situation gets even more complicated with Christmas brought into the mix, and it has everything to do with Chapter 4, Why Taiga Loves Christmas. We learn from early on in this arc that Taiga loves Christmas, almost to an uncharacteristic degree. Her classmates around her are surprised or even weirded out by this obsession, particularly with the fixation on Santa. But why does she love Christmas? She gives some fairly surface level answers when asked, but we begin to see the truth when she goes to the post office, a scene that is overlaid with a monologue that makes up half the setup for the climax of this arc. You know, the scene. It turns out that every year Taiga buys a bunch of presents for children at an orphanage that she used to volunteer at. This selfless act essentially makes her to these kids what she believed Kitamura was for her, someone who cared about them unconditionally, something that Taiga feels as though she lacks in her life. Of course, she does this because, in her own words, I want to believe it's true too, that someone's out there watching over me. This is, of course, her entire motivation in the show, to achieve some kind of genuine connection with another person who cares for her unconditionally. This is what made her fall in love with Kitamura. This is what made her fall for her dad's old tricks so quickly. This is what led her to reconsider how she feels about Ryuji, and of course, it makes her desperate enough for the scene to play out the way it does. This desire for a connection has manifested itself as a love for Santa. Her memory of meeting the man in red is one of her favourites, and it makes sense that she would develop a strong sense of nostalgia for this memory in particular, partly due to how she sets the scene. I was a little kid. My mum and dad were still together. How do her parents being together have anything to do with this story? Well, it harkens back to a time when she still had a regular family life. And that's not to say that people with divorced parents can't have that, but for Taiga, someone who for all intents and purposes believes she has no family, I can see why she would reminisce about a time when she did have one. The story ends with Santa telling her, "If you're a good girl, Taiga, I'll be back next year." Santa, the stand-in for her desire for human connection, could come back around Christmas if she's good, if she behaves herself, if she is worthy of that connection. Taiga fundamentally believes that love is something that she could miss out on if she does not act, something that Ryuji believes as well, especially more so now that his relationship with Minori is strained. But he holds out hope because, after all, Chapter 5, it still shines like it used to. Minori hits her lowest point in the show when she hits a rogue ball during practice that knocks over a Christmas tree and destroys Taiga's favourite ornament in the process. When she tries to fix it, she and Ryuji have another conversation that is steeped in allegory. Minori tells our main characters that she ruined the star because of a preventable mistake, but this is also how she feels about her relationship with Ryuji. She ruined it because she's letting herself be in love with him, clearly under the impression that love is something you can control if you work hard enough. But Ryuji helps her to fix the star and alleviates some of the pressure on Minori by telling her to just do what she can and allow him to help as well. More importantly, he makes it clear that he is trying to help her out of a desire to do so, and not out of obligation. This too can be metaphorically connected to their struggling bond. Ryuji is helping her to patch up their relationship, but instead of doing it to maintain a status quo, he is doing it because he wants to maintain that connection. Even though it broke, we can fix it. Minori is skeptical. "I can't undo what I've done" implies that her falling in love with Ryuji had irreparably damaged her and Ryuji's bond. But Ryuji is insistent that things are still in a place that they can come back from. "It still shines like it used to" is a phrase used to describe both the star and Minori herself, harkening back to episode 3 when he described her using very similar language. Even in a bad state of mind and lacking the confidence with which she usually carries herself, Ryuji still sees her as someone worth admiration. Minori persists that it will never be like it used to be, but Ryuji further insists that it will. "It doesn't matter how long it takes us, we can fix it." With Minori still rejecting Ryuji's invitation to the Christmas party, we end episode 18 and begin chapter 6, Setting the Stage. In the final episode of this arc, the first half sets the stage for what will happen by the end. Minori isn't going to the Christmas party, so Taiga leaves early to convince her to change her mind, and then goes home herself. Ryuji was unaware of this, and he is initially confused as to why Taiga would go about her plan like this, or not at least tell him about it. But Ami once again reinforces her warning. Maybe she wants to avoid a certain situation, she says, vaguely alluding to the conflict that Taiga is going to have with herself, both loving Ryuji and trying to help him get together with Minori. When Ryuji thinks about Taiga's promise to help him at all costs, he begins to wonder if she is sacrificing too much for his sake. At that moment, he thinks about her apartment. For Ryuji, Taiga's apartment has always been the ultimate symbol of her isolation, a cold living space that can be referred to as a house, so to speak, but cannot be referred to as a home. It is at this point that he has the same gut-wrenching revelation that he did during the Culture Festival arc, that Taiga is alone. We see Taiga convincing Minori to go to the party. Minori has been invited to the Christmas party by Ryuji no less than 3 times over the course of this arc, and she has refused each one. Again, this is due to guilt. She knows that she really likes Ryuji and that she doesn't want to betray Taiga, but having Taiga herself come to her house and encourage her to go see Ryuji seemingly pushes her over the line. She is now in a state where she will go see Ryuji, and perhaps even reciprocate his feelings if he happens to confess. However, Taiga has only just gotten her over that line. The smallest doubt as to whether Taiga loves Ryuji could easily knock her back to where she was. But hey, what are the odds of that happening? So, we have a very conflicted Minori slowly making her way to the Christmas party. Taiga sitting in her apartment alone, and Ryuji running in a desperate bid to keep her company. With all the pieces in place, the stage is finally set for Chapter 7, The Visit. Taiga has more or less given up on Santa coming to visit her, which is all the more devastating when you remember that Santa to her represents a stable, loving, caring relationship with someone else. And not only does she doubt it will ever come, but she doubts that it even exists. That's why I'm alone again this year, and that's why I'll be alone next year. She has given up. Santa isn't coming. She's not getting the family she has always wanted. She's conceded that she is destined to be alone. But then, Santa does arrive, and it's every bit as exciting as Taiga had always imagined it. She reverts to this childlike personality and has the most fun we've seen her have in over 19 episodes. "This is real," she says. "My dream. It came true." This internal dialogue once again carries 2 meanings. The surface level explanation is that her dream of meeting Santa has come true, that she has been good enough to warrant a second visit. But of course, she knows that Ryuji is the one in that suit. So the second meaning is that her dream of achieving a genuine connection with someone who cares for her has come true. That despite all her flaws, there is still one person out there who thinks that she has been worthy enough to get a visit from Santa. Once she's had her fill of Christmas joy, she thanks the person who brought it to her. Not Santa, but Ryuji. Once the bear head is off, we return to a point I briefly touched on in the family fallacy. Despite being bratty, inconsiderate, and aggressive, Taiga has always been quite selfless. She said during the Mr. Lucky Man race that she didn't need anyone to help her. At the time, I said that Taiga was wrong, but I didn't mention what led her to say those things. Taiga's feelings of inferiority, the same that make her so aggressive, also make her quite selfless in a don't make a fuss over me, I don't care about myself so why should you kind of way. This same selflessness is displayed in this scene when she literally pushes Ryuji out the door, telling him that he has done more than enough. I got my present, Santa came, and that now it was time for him to go and fulfill his own dream. At this moment, Taiga is essentially giving up everything she ever wanted in life to ensure that Ryuji will be happy, but she doesn't fully realize that until Chapter 8, The Scene. The scene most commonly referred to as the Lost My Pieces scene, referencing the brilliant OST track that plays over it. After re-entering her apartment, she immediately notices that she forgot to return Ryuji's scarf, the one he once lent her to comfort her feelings of inadequacy over Kitamura's turmoil, and that he had lent to her again tonight because she was cold. The scarf is a symbol of Ryuji's caring nature, and it makes sense that it would be something that provides warmth and hugs the user in the process. This artifact of their bond seemingly means as much to Taiga as finding it seems to be what sets off an aspect of herself that has either been dormant or aggressively internalized. Tears immediately begin to fall on the scarf. This briefly confuses Taiga, but she quickly realizes what it means. She realizes something that I said all the way back in Admiration and Acceptance, that all the reasons she had for loving Kitamura were more so true for Ryuji. She has finally realized that in a way that she can fully comprehend, right after she forced him out the door to pursue his love for someone else. This happens over a series of shots, most of which depict moments that Ryuji has been there for her. There are some shots from the Mr. Lucky Man race, a race in which Ryuji disregarded his social aspirations and gave his all to be by Taiga's side. It shows a clip from Army's introduction arc where Taiga had hit a low point and Ryuji came to her house to cheer her back up. It shows us the moment that Taiga first realized that she might like Ryuji, resting her feet on his back at the beach house. And most importantly of all, for the sake of this scene, we see the moment that Ryuji declares that he will have the strength to stand by her, no matter what. A promise that he has kept to this day. She comes to realize just how much she has come to depend on him, how wonderful an addition he has been to her life, and most importantly, how all of these positive aspects are soon going to end. She knows that Minori likes Ryuji and vice versa, so it's all but guaranteed that they will enter a relationship tonight, and that means that she can no longer be with Ryuji. She can no longer walk by him. She can no longer be the one to stand by his side. She's always known that this day was coming, that she would one day lose Ryuji to Minori, but she's never quite accepted it. We've known from as early as episode 8 that she cares for him a great deal, and doesn't like the idea that other people may get between them, and that thought is just as unbearable now as it was back then. We learn as she says the last words we hear before she begins her full-on meltdown. The only words she can really say when she realizes that she is about to lose her best friend, and what may be her only true shot at having the family she has always wanted. I can't bear that. Without any thought, she bolts out of her apartment and onto the cold street below. She cries Ryuji's name, but it's too late. He isn't there. Has anyone ever wondered what would have happened if Ryuji was within earshot? If he heard her and came back? How the story might have played out differently? Well, unfortunately, Ryuji did not witness this moment. But Minori did. Chapter 9. Minori's Choice. I like to think that I was right when I said that the slightest bit of doubt would have changed Minori's mind as to how she would deal with Ryuji. But we will never know, because what she has just seen is as close to confirmation that Taiga loves Ryuji that she will ever get. And so she makes her choice. Using the allegory from the beach house arc, she tells Ryuji that she doesn't want to see ghosts anymore, and that it may even be better if she never does. This is, of course, her way of telling him that she isn't interested in love, not even from him. And Ryuji, as stunned as he is at first, takes it about as well as you would expect. This whole arc, from the moment Ami confronted her to this scene, Minori has been struggling to choose what was more important to her, to come to terms with her romantic feelings for Ryuji and the guilt she had over betraying Taiga. And now that she has seen Taiga break down in front of her eyes, she decides that Taiga is more important to her, and she makes the choice to let Ryuji go. Conclusion. In Ghost Hunter's Getaway, I speculated on whether or not Toradora can be considered a harem anime, and determined that it could not be based on the structure of the story and the lack of fetishization that the show gives to the idea of having multiple women in love with one man. But after analysing this arc, I wonder if it's actually a critique of the harem genre. The Lost My Pieces scene is akin to the ending of Spec Ops or certain scenes from Logan. This media delivers and promotes a fantasy, one that you agree with and have fun watching, only to go wrong in all the obvious ways and then rub your face into the destroyed lives of the people who got hurt in the midst of your fantasy. I mean, this is how an actual harem would work out. It wouldn't be several girls all playing fair to get your attention. It would involve heartbreak, tearing apart relationships, and alienating the people closest to you. That's partly why the Lost My Pieces scene hits as hard as it does, because until now, the show has been quite lighthearted and consequence-free. It's been a simple story about two people helping each other get with their crushes, and the crazy hijinks that ensue. But this scene pulls the rug out from under the viewer and makes them appreciate the dangers of that kind of dynamic. The dangers that Ami tried to warn Ryuji and the audience about, but just like Ryuji, we didn't really think about it. It's just a fun little show about high schoolers after all. And then the show drops this bombshell, and cynically smiles at our devastated expressions as it sarcastically spits the phrase, "Now you don't have to feel guilty." This arc brings Ryuji, Taiga, Minori, and Ami to their lowest points. Each character will have their own means to deal with this and move past it, but none will truly get the closure they need until the end of the show. And that is it for this analysis. I'd like to thank my patrons Orion Train, Quincy Chamberlain, Jaman5, Lars Espen, Shark, and Data52. If you would like a credit at the end of each video and an exclusive update video every month, why not become a patron yourself? Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.